All right. What is up, everyone? Thanks for coming today. We're going to have some fun talking about the difference between D3 and Tableau. I've got a little slideshow here that I'm going to go through, and we'll talk about some stuff. So let me pull that up for you now. All right, so welcome to this show. Today we're going to talk about Tableau versus D3. I am Ben Sullins, the data geek, and let me give you a breakdown of what we're going to learn. So first we're going to do an overview of Tableau and then an overview of D3. We'll look at arguments for each, and then we'll talk about some examples. I'll show you some examples and some fun ones. Chose out some specific examples for you, and even one that compares the two. It's kind of cool. Then I'll get into when to use which one. So depending on your use case, depending on other factors that I'll mention, I'll give you some guidance, or at least my recommendations on when you would use D3 versus Tableau. And lastly, I'll point you at where you can find more info. All right, so let's get going here. The first thing I want to do is just do an overview of Tableau and an overview of D3. So here I have d3js.org, and what this is their main homepage. And you can see it's data-driven documents. So the idea here is that it's a JavaScript library that basically manipulates web pages, or documents in this case, and it uses web standards, so HTML, SVG, which is an HTML5 component, to draw graphics, and it uses CSS. So it's open source. It's a library for drawing things, essentially. You could boil it down to that. It's incredibly powerful and has a lot of features. So the basic difference here between this and, say, Tableau is more of an analytics tool. So, at the high level, this is like what D3 is. If you're not a JavaScript developer or web developer, I'll not spend too much time on this, but basically it allows you to select components on the page. Like here, we're selecting paragraphs and changing the color. And then you can manipulate those things with functions and dynamic things like this, where instead of having the color just be specified hand-coded, I can use some sort of function to return what that is. It does real-time updating, so you can actually have new data come in and other data exit. So as, let's say, events occur outside of there, you could do something with like a WebSocket and actually push data to the page and have it interact. And you can also do things like inside of the SVG, create interactions so you can click and make things, move around and whatever. Then it has the transition, so it has a way to kind of animate things to where, if you're changing from one viz to another or applying some transformation, you can do that kind of gracefully. So D3 has kind of this whole spectrum of things. Remember, it's basically a developer tool for making beautiful graphics on the web. Now over here in Tableau, you have an analytics platform. And let me see what the headline is. In fact, business intelligence and analytics. So this is a desktop tool that originally was kind of geared at Excel data, and you could take Excel data and make these really beautiful interactive charts. That was many moons ago. Now it's a fully robust analytics solution. One of the key differences here is that this is not a web oriented technology, meaning it does, work on the web, but it was originally designed as a desktop tool. And so think of it like almost if you have a Photoshop or something like that, where it's a desktop tool that's incredibly powerful, and you can become an analyst and use data from lots of different places and create beautiful interactive visualizations, then share them on the web. So the web is kind of the afterthought. And when you do so, it also doesn't really render them in the native web technologies. So it has its kind of own proprietary way of doing it. That said, Tableau is super fast and easy. In fact, like the tagline says, it's analytics for everyone. The learning curve here is very very gradual, very very short, I guess you could say. Where really, if you know how to do a pivot table in Excel, you can get going with Tableau. It's that easy. So creating beautiful maps and interactive displays on the web, you can do that, right here and really simply without actually having to write any code at all. Now that said, Tableau isn't free. There's the desktop product, which runs, I think, $1,000 for personal and $2,000 for professional. Tableau Server is definitely not free. Tableau Online is like a cloud-hosted one. So this is kind of in the enterprise software space, whereas D3 is more of just a JavaScript charting library, something that just used by web developers to make stuff on the web. So that's a quick overview of the two different ones there. So let's take a look and switch back to our presentation now. And I'm going to talk about arguments for each one. So the first are the arguments for D3. And one of the key arguments is that it's open source, and which is great because then other people can contribute to it. There's a big community that uses D3, a huge community, really. It's really hot in kind of the web technologies right now. Whereas Tableau is proprietary, it costs money, and it's closed. So if you are a developer and you're using this technology and you want to enhance it, you want to take the code and actually build upon it and make something new and different, or improve the functionality or whatever, you won't be able to do that, or not in the same level. Tableau does have APIs that allow you to extend it, but again, it's their software that they make and they sell. So that's their business model. D3 doesn't really have a business model. It's just an open source project. Now, D3 is web standards focused. So what that means is it generates HTML, SVG, CSS, all the standard stuff, so you can debug it in the web. It behaves like everything else on the web does. And you're not, confused by how that works, or if you're trying to work with it in a product or something else, it's not really different than anything else that you're used to doing on the web. Tableau uses something else called VizQL, which is a language that they developed to actually modify the visualizations and build those things. It's fantastic, it's powerful, but it's not web standard. So when you publish something to the web, it doesn't exactly work the way other things on the web do. For example, if you see text inside of a visualization in Tableau on the web, you can't select that text. Because it renders an image instead of actual HTML elements. So that's kind of one of the arguments for D3, is that it's web standards based. D3 is also supports real-time updates. As I mentioned, the enter, and there's also an update and exit. So because it's JavaScript, it's running kind of in runtime technically, but in your browser, so you can interact with things kind of in real time, and new data can flow in and data can exit in real time. Now, Tableau has automated updates, but they're not real time. So you can have something refresh on a schedule, which is a common way to share stuff, and it works great. And in most cases, that's fine. But if you're building a web app like Twitter, for example, you can't say, "Oh, we'll refresh how many likes you got on your post tomorrow." I want to see that right now. So depending on your use case, you may need that data up to the moment, and Tableau really struggles to try to give that to you. Now, D3 has expansive viz options, and I'll get into some of that when we talk about the examples here in a moment. In Tableau, I would say has limited viz choices. I put an asterisk there because I've seen some incredible things done in Tableau. Some things you often wonder why you would use Tableau to do that. But in general, I would say D3 can draw any possible thing that you can imagine. And Tableau, while very powerful, is typically, for most people anyways, confined to a subset of those visualizations. Now, with that said, in terms of tools that do the visualizations for you like Tableau does, it's the best one out there by far. So it's not like, hey, I only have 5 charts to choose from. I can really manipulate those charts 100 different ways, but I can't do anything I want, right? I can't just automatically build really any kind of visualization I want, which is in D3, it really does let you kind of just do anything you can imagine and draw up, you can make. All right, so let's turn the tables. Arguments for Tableau. So D3 requires lots of coding. Literally, hundreds of lines, thousands of lines of code aren't uncommon in really more complex visualizations. Tableau, in seconds. I can just fire it up, connect some data, and bam, I've got a beautiful, visualizations that let me interact with my data. D3 is complex. The library is quite large. It's getting bigger, becoming more and more, sophisticated in how it's implemented. Whereas Tableau is easy to use. Like I said, if you know how to do a pivot table, you're good. Then we have limited data connections in D3. So D3 can do things like pull data from an API and pull data from a JSON file or a CSV file, but it can't easily do something like connect to Hadoop or connect to a SQL Server database, for example. So Tableau has tons and tons of native connections. So if you're trying to work with data from lots of different places, in D3, you're going to have to kind of boil it down to some way that is real easy if you want to simplify that part of the process. And Tableau has actually done a huge amount of that work for you. Now in D3, if you want to do a calculation, let's say a moving average, that's a simple calculation. You can do that, but it's manual. And by manual, what I mean is you're going to have to write that function yourself. And it's going to be something that isn't entirely out of the box, right? You're going to have to come up with that. So if you have advanced calculations, you're going to have to get pretty heavy with it. Now, the good thing is there's a big community out there. But in Tableau space, I'm calling these automated calculations, literally one click, and I can come up with year-over-year growth or something like that. And so with that, there's a lot of arguments there, against D3 and for Tableau. The last one here are the data manipulations. So in D3, there's a couple functions that can let you do things like aggregate, do a sum or an average of something, but not a ton. And in Tableau, there's just a huge amount. In fact, they seem to be getting more and more into this space of being able to take raw data in kind of like a very granular format and come up with lots of ways to manipulate that and transform it into something that's easy to work with. Okay, let's take a look at some examples. I'm going to switch back over to my browser. And in fact, on the D3 homepage here, this is pretty cool because you can actually hover over these, and these are real visualizations. So where was the one I was looking at earlier? Here it is, this map. And this one's kind of cool where it's geographic bounding boxes. So kind of hard to explain what that is in a short period of time here, but you can see how I can just interact with this, how I can hover over it and I can click and drag and see, the whole world there, essentially what's going on. And here's this diagram exactly, explaining what's happening with that. So this is one way to find some of the examples. One of the other ones, it does these kind of chord diagrams where you can see things like this. You may have seen some popular ones like this on the web. And, when you look at these, they're often rendered in something called blocks. That's bl.ocks.org, or let me see, is that right? Yeah, bl.ocks.org. So this is a way to actually post a GitHub gist and have it render it for you. It includes the code, and then if there's any data or anything else, this is how, one way to share your D3 examples. So with Tableau, they have something called Tableau Public, and this is a place where people can publish things for free. So you can visualize your data and share it for free. As it mentioned, there's not there's no security to this, right? So it's totally open to the public. But they have a cool thing here, this gallery, and in the gallery they have lots of visualizations, and some of these, like this one here, is something built with Tableau. So you can see there. Let me see if I can get rid of that guy. Yeah, so you can see kind of what, the quality of these is still really good. And when I hover over them, you can have some really interactive stuff. Like see how that selected across all these different charts? And this is legit, right? So there's this gallery here on Tableau Public. These are great ways to get inspiration, and you can kind of back into a visualization if you see one you like. You'll notice, again, just the interface here. It's not quite the same as how you're used to viewing stuff on the web, right? It looks a little bit like, just not native web technology. It's because it's not. This isn't based on the typical stuff that you build web pages with. It's built off of Tableau's thing. So, there's some fun examples there. I have one here. And first off, I just want to mention Kelly Martin with VizCandy. You can go to her website, vizcandy.ca. She does incredible work, and it sounds like they have a group of people there. And she's really taken, I think, the level of care and precision with creating visualizations in Tableau to a whole new level. And so kudos to her. And I bring her up because she has a great example here where she replicated this New York Times D3 chart in Tableau. So here's her example here. And you can see kind of how this works and how it looks. Maybe if it updates. Maybe I had the page open too long. And interestingly enough, the reason why you see a lot of this stuff on the New York Times website, this was an example of that, is because the creator of D3, Mike Bostock, used to work for the New York Times as a graphics editor. So here is her, demo explaining this, but you can see how clean and nice and beautiful this is in Tableau. It's just uncommon, I guess, or not out of the box to create something so crystal clear like that. So kudos to her, and that's one fun example there. Now, if you're getting deep into the Tableau stuff, I would be remiss to not mention my friend Andy Kriebel, who has a great website, viswiz.blogspot.com. I still haven't convinced him to get real hosting yet, so maybe one day he'll update that. But here he has, and Andy, if you're listening, sorry, buddy, we'll chat later. He has a ton of great examples here. I mean, so if you want to learn stuff about Tableau, this guy, he just really kills it. And he also has a fun thing here called Makeover Monday. And this is him and another Tableau guru, Andy Cockgrave, from the UK, and they do these examples where they take, public stuff, something that was published by somebody else, and they kind of remake it. They redo it in Tableau. So you can see some of those examples here, and you can see, I forget which one's which, but one of these is Andy Kriebel's, the other one's Andy Cockgreaves. So if you're looking for examples in Tableau, there really isn't a better resource here than the Tableau Public Gallery. This example is this site here, and then Kelly Martin's website. On the D3 website, again, there are some examples. There's actually a whole gallery here where you can see the different types of diagrams and see the different types of things happening. Again, as I mentioned before, they have just a really interesting or really detailed way of coming up with these. So if I take a look at this choropleth map, you'll see kind of some of the things that you can do with D3, right? So this is coloring every county, I believe it is, with this kind of color scale. And this is all, web compliant stuff. The code's right there. All right, so my shameless plug, I have a viz on my site, which is every Game of Thrones battle. Oh, and it looks like I broke the images. That's no good. See if I can get the full-size one to work. There you go. So this is an example of a D3 viz. This is called a forced layout. I have a new course coming out in Pluralsight on this. But you can see what it is. This is every family from the, not House of Cards, from Game of Thrones, and when they've attacked each other. And each line there is essentially is a battle. If you hover over it, you can see, the details of the battle. The color coding is based on who won and who lost and all that kind of stuff. So this is just another example of some D3 stuff that you can do. All right, so on to the meat of it. When to use which one? This is the tough part. So there's some key factors here. Let me pull up my notes. So the first one I want to talk about is speed. And I don't mean speed as in the speed of rendering, although that is a factor. It's the speed of kind of concept to cache. So we might call data to viz in our case, where the time it takes from when you get some data to when you have a viz that helps you answer a question or help you get some insight is a big factor. So really think about that. I would say here Tableau kind of wins this one typically because it's just built for that whole thing. It's all about the flow and getting the data in and exploring it visually. When it comes to actually performance on the web, it's hard to argue against D3 because it is a native web technology. So Tableau, as you saw even in those examples, several seconds to load, kind of the whole page is kind of grayed out. You can't touch it or interact with it, whereas the D3 ones just come up pretty instantaneously. Now, control is the other one. So if you want control over your display, you can have a fine grain of control with Tableau, but in D3, remember, it's generating HTML natively. So you have all the control that you have over the same types of controls with any other web element. So you can use CSS to style your elements. So it's actually really fine grained, and you can do a lot inside of D3 to actually control exactly how things get rendered and exactly the positions and all those kind of things. The next thing is internal versus external. I think internally, Tableau makes a ton of sense because you're not going for or you're not worrying about scale. You're not worrying, you can be a bit messy, right? I can just hack together a viz real quick and share it with somebody. It doesn't have to be this like beautifully polished, highly performant, fast thing or whatever. Where externally, you need to think about those things a little bit more. So, like I said, Tableau Public does work, and you can publish things, and I certainly use it quite a bit. But depending on what you're doing, right? If you're the New York Times and you're building some interactive graphs to try to keep people engaged and tell a story, you're going to have more control and a better experience, I think, or a better end product if you take the time to build it in D3. Not to say you couldn't do it in Tableau, I just think D3 is a better choice. So let's talk about these use cases. The first one are internal analytics platform. Hands down, Tableau, that's what it's designed to do. Right, that's what it's made for. If you tried to do this in D3, you would have to do a ton of work that probably wouldn't really yield you much better results at all than you just using Tableau. Public data viz work, I think they're both valid contenders for this one. Embedding into a product, and what I mean by that is if I'm a company and I have an app, or if I have a website where my customers log in and look at their data or analytics about their use of my app or whatever, like Pluralsight has. For teams and corporate accounts, you can log in and see who's watching what, how much, all that kind of thing. I think D3 is a hands down winner in this case, mostly because, again, it's just a native web technology, right? You're not using some third party proprietary system. As good as Tableau is, it still falls into that bucket. Now, if I need an answer fast, if I just want to figure something out and answer my question, Tableau, hands down. It's the fastest tool for getting an answer from data. Then we have some real-time interactive web stuff. I would say D3 again is the winner. You saw just even some of the examples there and how just interactive and how fluid that stuff is. It beats Tableau. It beats every other library out there, really. So they're kind of the champion in that space. Now, the key factors, I mentioned already some of this, but speed to delivery, Tableau. Control over the display is going to be D3. Internal use, it's going to be Tableau, and external use, it's going to be D3. Now, for great visualizations, I put them both. Tableau does a tremendous job. They make great software. It is a great way, especially if you're new to data visualization and getting into it, to really express yourself. You can find your voice with Tableau without having to be a coder. Now, if you are a programmer already, a web developer specifically, then D3 wouldn't be, the learning curve would be short for you as well. So they're both great options for telling stories with data and really making meaningful visualizations. All right, lastly, I want to give you some places where you can find more information. The first one are Pluralsight courses. Of course, I'm biased here. Tableau Fundamentals, one of mine, and D3 Fundamentals. So if you're interested in learning about either of these, we have courses on both of those, and you can get up to speed pretty quickly, a few hours of each one, and you'll be building charts, doing data visualizations, all that kind of stuff. And if you need help with Pluralsight, if you don't have a license or anything, they have a free trial. I'll put a link on this page or on the show notes here, and you can get a free trial through my website there. Then externally, of course, there's Tableau, d3js.org, and my site where I post about both of these regularly. I hope you've enjoyed this session today. Let me see if there's any questions. It doesn't look like we have any right now. But if you do have questions later, feel free to email me at help@bensullins.com. Or find me on Twitter. I'm @BenSullins. And I thank you for your time, and I'll see you back here soon.